Jack Turner had always been content with his quiet life in the small, serene town of Crestwood. It was a place where everyone knew everyone else, and the biggest piece of news most days was the arrival of a new family or the opening of a local shop. Jack was in his late 30s, single, and working as a high school history teacher. He had everything one could need: a steady job, a comfortable two-bedroom house on the outskirts of town, and a group of good friends. But there was one thing missing. Jack longed to be a father. He had always dreamed of raising children, teaching them life's lessons, and sharing in their growth and development. However, as the years went by, it seemed like that dream would remain unfulfilled. Jack had no children of his own, and despite his desires, it never seemed like the right time. Relationships came and went, but fatherhood remained an elusive goal. Still, Jack held on to hope, even though he felt the clock ticking. One day, as he was passing through the local library, Jack's eyes landed on a small, worn flyer that had been pinned to the community bulletin board. It was a notice from the local adoption agency, and it caught his attention immediately. The flyer was seeking a loving home for three young sisters, Maya, Olivia, and Ella, who were all under 1 year old. They had been abandoned by a relative who could no longer care for them and were in need of an adoptive parent willing to keep them together. Without hesitation, Jack's heart swelled. He couldn't ignore the pull he felt. The three girls had already been placed in separate foster homes, but the agency's goal was to find a single family that would accept all three siblings. Jack was struck by the urgency of the request. He had always wanted children, and here was an opportunity not only to become a father, but to keep these three girls together, offering them the stability they needed. The notion of adopting siblings was something that resonated deeply with him. He knew that family was about more than just biology, and he wanted to give these girls a chance at a real home. Jack was not a man of great means. His teacher's salary was modest, and his house was small, but the love he felt in his heart was boundless. He carefully weighed the decision. Could he handle the responsibility of raising three young children on his own? He had no experience as a father, and he knew the challenges would be enormous. But as he looked at the photos of the three little girls, Maya, the energetic one, Olivia, the shy and thoughtful one, and Ella, the one who had a quiet, knowing gaze, he knew there was no turning back. These girls needed him, and he needed them. With determination in his heart, Jack began the adoption process. The paperwork was overwhelming, the interviews nerve-wracking, and there were moments when he doubted himself. But his resolve never wavered. He filled out the application, underwent the background checks, and went through the long, exhausting interviews with social workers. Jack knew it was a lengthy and challenging process, but he was ready. He was doing this for them, for the three girls who had nowhere else to go but his arms. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack received the call. The adoption had been approved. Maya, Olivia, and Ella were officially his daughters. Jack could hardly believe it, but the joy that filled him was unmatched. He couldn't wait to bring them home. The first day the girls came to live with him was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Jack had prepared the best he could. He had turned his small office into a nursery, bought toys and clothes, and even arranged for a few playdates with friends and neighbors. Still, nothing could truly prepare him for the whirlwind of emotions and responsibilities that came with raising three infants. The house, once peaceful and quiet, was now filled with the sounds of little feet running, baby giggles, and the constant buzz of activity. Maya was the most cheerful of the three, always smiling and laughing, a beacon of joy in Jack's life. Olivia, on the other hand, was more reserved, with a quiet demeanor that made her seem older than her age. Ella was the most observant, content to sit back and watch her sisters with a keen eye. Jack quickly found himself becoming their rock, their caretaker, and their protector. He spent his days changing diapers, preparing meals, soothing them when they cried, and finding ways to entertain them. The chaotic rhythm of his life, although exhausting, was exactly what he had dreamed of. In the months that followed, Jack grew into his role as a father. The sleepless nights and early morning feedings were draining, but they were also full of love and promise. Jack's house, once small and quiet, was now full of life. He was learning to navigate the challenges of fatherhood, and with every milestone, first steps, first words, and the girls' growing personalities, he felt his heart grow fuller. His life had indeed changed forever, and though the future was uncertain, Jack had no doubt that he was exactly where he needed to be. The 3 little girls he had adopted had made his world infinitely brighter, and together, they were a family. As the years passed, Jack Turner settled into his new role as a father, and his home, once quiet and lonely, now hummed with life. Raising 3 young girls was no small task, but Jack was ready for the challenge. He had always dreamed of being a father, and now he was experiencing the reality of it. Every messy, joyful, and exhausting moment. Maya, Olivia, and Ella each had their own unique personalities, but they shared one undeniable trait: their unbreakable bond with Jack. Maya, the eldest of the 3, was the most energetic and outgoing. From the time she could walk, she was always on the move, racing through the house, climbing anything she could find, and talking a mile a minute. She had a laughter that could light up a room, and it was impossible not to be swept up in her enthusiasm. Jack often found himself chasing her around the house, trying to keep up with her never-ending curiosity. Maya loved to run, and Jack would take her out into the backyard to race up and down the lawn, laughing and encouraging her every step of the way. She was a bundle of joy, but also a whirlwind that kept Jack on his toes. She excelled in sports from a young age, particularly soccer, and Jack was there for every practice and every game, cheering her on with pride. Olivia, the second sister, was different from Maya in many ways. While Maya thrived on activity and socializing, Olivia was more introspective and creative. She spent hours drawing, painting, and creating little worlds with her art. Jack often found her sitting quietly at the kitchen table, lost in her drawings, her pencil moving swiftly across the paper as she brought her imagination to life. Olivia's art was her way of expressing herself, and Jack encouraged it every step of the way. He even hung some of her paintings around the house, proudly displaying her talent. Olivia wasn't as outgoing as her older sister, but she had a quiet charm that drew people to her. Jack treasured the moments when Olivia would come to him with her latest drawing, her face lighting up as she showed him what she had created. Ella, the youngest of the 3, was a quiet and observant child. She wasn't as talkative as Maya or as artistic as Olivia, but she had a wisdom that far exceeded her years. Ella loved to read, and Jack quickly discovered that the small library he had built for himself in the corner of the living room was often filled with Ella's books. She would sit for hours, absorbed in the pages, as if the world outside didn't exist. She had a natural gift for storytelling, and often she would make up her own tales, weaving intricate plots and fascinating characters. Jack loved to listen to Ella's stories, amazed by her imagination and the depth of her thought. He would sit beside her as she read aloud, his heart swelling with pride as he realized how much she had grown. Despite their differences, the 3 girls had formed an unbreakable bond with each other. They were inseparable, and their love for one another was evident in everything they did. They had their disagreements, as all siblings do, but those moments were always brief, and they quickly returned to their closeness. The bond they shared was something that Jack had worked hard to nurture, and it filled his heart with warmth every day. He wanted nothing more than for them to grow up feeling loved, supported, and cherished. Jack made sure to be present in all aspects of their lives. He attended every school event, from parent-teacher conferences to soccer games to art exhibitions. When Maya scored her first goal in a game, Jack was there, on the sidelines, cheering her on with a proud smile. When Olivia's art was displayed at a local gallery, Jack stood beside her, beaming with pride as she nervously explained each piece. When Ella was awarded a certificate for her reading achievements, Jack was there, clapping the loudest and congratulating her with a warm hug. He had always dreamed of being a father, but now he was living that dream. And every moment was more fulfilling than he had imagined. The girls, in turn, adored their father. They had grown up knowing only Jack as their father, and the love they had for him was deep and unconditional. They looked up to him, not only as a father but as a guide, a protector, and a role model. They had never known a life without him, and he had become the center of their world. Jack never took their love for granted. Every night, after a busy day of school and activities, they would gather around the dinner table, sharing stories about their day, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. It was these simple moments that Jack cherished the most, just the five of them, together, feeling like a family. Despite the challenges they faced, from late-night feedings when they were infants to the stress of raising 3 active children, Jack was determined to create a stable, loving home for the girls. He had worked hard to provide for them, to ensure they had everything they needed, and most importantly, to make sure they felt loved. As the years went by, Jack saw his daughters growing into young women, each with their own passions and dreams. Maya was excelling in sports, Olivia was winning art awards, and Ella had developed a love for writing and literature. Jack couldn't have been more proud of them. But deep down, there was a part of him that carried a secret, a truth about their past that he had never shared with them. The years of bonding had been filled with laughter, love, and growth. Jack had fulfilled his dream of becoming a father, and he had done it with all the love and devotion he had to offer. But as the girls approached their 18th birthday, the unspoken truth was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Jack knew that someday, the past would catch up with them, and he wasn't sure if they were ready to face it. But for now, he was content, watching his daughters grow and knowing that, no matter what, they were a family. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Jack Turner watched his 3 daughters grow into young women. Maya, Olivia, and Ella were thriving, each carving their own path in the world. But just as the girls were preparing to celebrate their 18th birthday, an unexpected turn of events began to unravel the quiet life they had built together. It started with Maya. The once energetic and always optimistic girl had begun to slow down. At first, Jack assumed it was just the stress of her senior year, balancing soccer practice with school, college applications, and the pressure of growing up. Maya had always been the active one, constantly on the go. So when she started complaining about feeling unusually tired, Jack didn't think much of it. He chalked it up to the pressures of being the star player on her high school soccer team and the demands of preparing for life after graduation. But over time, the fatigue only seemed to worsen. Maya's exhaustion was followed by dizzy spells. She would sometimes stumble or faint, her face drained of color. At first, Jack thought it was nothing serious, perhaps dehydration or too much stress. But as the weeks passed, the symptoms only got worse. Maya began to feel nauseous frequently and struggled to keep up with daily tasks. She would sit down after just a few minutes of activity, her breath coming in short, labored gasps. Jack couldn't ignore it any longer. He insisted they go to the hospital for a full checkup. The doctor's office visit was the first of many. Jack tried to stay hopeful, but deep down, he feared the worst. Maya's health continued to decline, and the hospital visits became more frequent. It wasn't long before the doctors had a diagnosis. Maya had a severe kidney condition. Her kidneys were failing, and without a transplant, her life was in jeopardy. Jack's heart sank as the doctor explained that without a donor, Maya might not survive much longer. In the chaos that followed the diagnosis, Jack did what any father would do. He looked to her sisters for help. He immediately contacted Olivia and Ella, hoping that one of them might be a suitable match for a kidney transplant. Maya had always been close with her sisters, and Jack hoped their strong familial bond might extend to a match in the donor registry. He asked both Olivia and Ella to undergo testing, knowing that time was running out. The waiting period was agonizing. Jack held his breath as the test results came in. When the doctor finally walked into the room, Jack could see from the expression on his face that something was wrong. Neither Olivia nor Ella was a match. The doctor explained that while they shared a mother, their genetic markers were not close enough for the transplant to be successful. Jack's mind raced. This was the moment he had feared, the moment the truth about their biological backgrounds was about to come to light. The doctor's words hit Jack like a freight train. The tests had uncovered something far more unsettling than just a mismatch in kidney compatibility. According to the results, Maya, Olivia, and Ella weren't biologically sisters in the way Jack had believed. Yes, they had been raised together, but genetically, they were far more distant than he had ever imagined. The doctor's grim tone explained that the genetic differences between them were so vast that they could have been complete strangers, not sisters at all. Jack's mind swirled with confusion and fear. He had always known that the girls had different fathers, but he had never allowed himself to delve too deeply into the specifics of their background. The adoption agency had provided vague details about their mother's troubled past, substance issues, legal problems, and a history of instability. But Jack had always chosen to focus on what mattered most, the love they shared as a family. Now, however, the truth he had kept hidden for so long was about to shatter everything. The doctor left the room, and Jack was left alone with Olivia and Ella, who stood there, their faces full of questions. They had always known they were adopted, but this was something entirely different. Their entire world, the family they had grown up with, was suddenly cast into doubt. They had always believed they were sisters, that no matter what their biological backgrounds were, they were family. But now, it seemed that their bond was based on something that wasn't entirely true. Olivia, the quiet one, was the first to speak. "Dad, what's going on? What does this mean?" Her voice was soft, but full of confusion. Ella, who had always been the most reserved, glanced nervously at Jack, waiting for answers. Jack's throat tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't find the words. He had always promised to protect them from the harsh realities of their past, but now, the truth was unavoidable. With a trembling voice, Jack began to explain. He told them everything, the adoption process, the little he knew about their biological mother, and how, despite their different fathers, he had raised them all with the same love and devotion. He confessed that he had kept the details of their past hidden because he feared it would hurt them. He had never wanted them to feel different from each other, and so he chose to keep the truth to himself. The room was silent after Jack spoke. Olivia and Ella stood there, processing what they had just learned. For a long time, they said nothing. The truth was more than they had ever expected, and it felt like the floor had been pulled out from under them. They had always assumed they were sisters, bound by blood, but now they were faced with the reality that their connection was not as simple as they had believed. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes as she looked at Jack. "Why didn't you tell us, Dad?" she asked softly. "Didn't you trust us enough to handle the truth?" Jack felt his heart break as he looked at his daughters. He had always done his best to protect them, but in doing so, he had kept them in the dark. "I was afraid," he whispered. "I didn't want to break the bond you three shared. That bond has always meant everything to me." Ella, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "You should have told us sooner, Dad. We had a right to know." Jack's heart ached as he looked at their disappointed faces. He had never wanted to hurt them, but he now understood that by keeping the truth from them, he had done just that. The girls had always been his daughters, and nothing could change that, but the road ahead was uncertain, and Jack wasn't sure how they would navigate this new reality. As the conversation continued, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The truth had come to light, and there was no going back. Jack couldn't undo what had been hidden for so long, but he hoped that, in time, the love they shared would be enough to heal the wounds that had opened between them. The days that followed the revelation were filled with a mixture of emotions. The truth about Maya, Olivia, and Ella's biological origins had shaken the foundation of their family, and for Jack, the guilt weighed heavily on his heart. He had tried to shield his daughters from the harsh realities of their past, but in doing so, he had inadvertently caused them pain. The love they had shared for so long felt strained, and though Jack longed for things to return to normal, he knew it would take time for the wounds to heal. Maya, still recovering from her kidney condition, had the hardest time processing the truth. She had always been the most open-hearted of the three, her boundless energy and infectious smile lighting up any room she entered. But now, as she lay in a hospital bed, weak from the transplant surgery and struggling with the emotional weight of the secrets that had been kept from her, Maya found herself lost in thought. Her mind raced with questions about her mother, about her biological father, about her identity, and most importantly, about the family she had known her whole life. Olivia and Ella, too, were wrestling with the truth. While they hadn't been as outwardly affected by the revelation as Maya, the quiet hurt lingered in their hearts. They had spent years believing that they were sisters through and through, and now that belief had been shattered. Olivia, the more introspective of the three, struggled with feelings of betrayal. She had always cherished the bond she shared with her sisters and her father, and now she wasn't sure what that bond meant. Ella, who had always been the most reserved, was deeply affected but didn't know how to express it. She had always looked up to Jack as her rock, and now she was questioning everything. Jack tried to comfort them as best as he could, but his own guilt and confusion made it difficult to know what to say. He spent hours sitting by Maya's bedside, talking to her, holding her hand, and reassuring her that she was still his daughter, no matter what the test results said. He apologized over and over for keeping the truth from them, but Maya, though still angry and hurt, couldn't bring herself to fully blame him. She knew that he had loved them with all his heart, and she also knew that love was what had kept their family intact all these years. The girls, though reeling from the truth, also realized that their love for each other had not changed. Despite the bloodlines that now felt like a distant reality, they had always been sisters, and they would remain sisters. They didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Their bond was not defined by their genetics. It was defined by the memories they had made together, the laughter they had shared, and the support they had given one another through the ups and downs of life. As the days turned into weeks, the family slowly began to heal. Jack made a promise to the girls. He would help them trace their roots if they wanted to, but he also promised that he would never keep anything from them again. The truth had hurt, but in many ways, it had also strengthened their bond. Jack realized that by keeping secrets, he had inadvertently placed a wall between himself and his daughters. Now that the truth had come out, there was nothing left to hide. The road ahead would not be easy, but Jack was determined to rebuild the trust they had lost. Maya, still recovering from her surgery, was the first to start opening up. One afternoon, as she sat on the couch with her sisters, she spoke the words that Jack had longed to hear. "I know it's hard, but I think we can get through this," she said softly, looking at Olivia and Ella. "You're my sisters, no matter what. Nothing's going to change that." Olivia and Ella nodded, their eyes still wet with tears, but a sense of relief washed over them. They realized that Maya was right. The love they shared was stronger than any DNA test or family secret. They were sisters, and nothing could ever change that. Jack, sitting nearby, felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. His daughters were resilient, more resilient than he had ever imagined. They weren't just his daughters by adoption. They were his daughters by love, by choice, and by the unbreakable bond they had forged over the years. The healing process wasn't quick, but it was steady. As the girls regained their strength, both physically and emotionally, they began to talk more openly about their past. Jack helped them with their research, tracing their biological roots as they had discussed. Some of the answers they found were difficult to hear, but it didn't change the fact that they were family. They had been raised with love, and that love was what had brought them together. It was the foundation of their relationship, and nothing, no matter how unsettling the truth, could take that away. Maya, Olivia and Ella continued to support each other as they navigated this new chapter in their lives. They spent more time together as a family, going on weekend trips, celebrating small victories, and simply enjoying each other's company. They still faced moments of tension and confusion, but they had learned to lean on each other for support. The house that Jack had once filled with laughter and love was now even more alive, filled with conversations, shared memories, and an understanding that, no matter what the future held, they were in this together. As the weeks passed, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. The wounds of the past had not fully healed, but they were on their way. The healing journey was ongoing, but the family was stronger than ever. Jack had learned that love could withstand even the most difficult truths. In the end, it wasn't the blood ties that mattered. It was the love they had for one another, the unwavering support they gave each other, and the bond they had forged through years of shared experiences. And so, the family moved forward, together. The past no longer defined them. It was their present and their future that mattered. Jack knew that, no matter what, his daughters would always be his daughters, and nothing could ever change that. The healing had begun, and with time, the wounds would fade, leaving only the love that had always been the foundation of their family.